Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on matching the coach with the coachee. Definitely excited to have you here, and of course, the first thing I want to say is Happy New Year to everyone. Hope you enjoyed your holidays thoroughly and are looking forward to a fabulous 2014. The conversation today is going to be particularly fun. There are a lot of you on the call. And just to let you know, some of you are coaches and have gone through the coaching. Some of you hire coaches. Some of you run coaching programs within your organization. So we definitely have some good variety in terms of who's on the call. We want to make sure we respond and provide valuable information from each of those perspectives. A number of you did submit questions ahead of time. I plan on answering those as we go through the program. And of course, I invite additional questions. Unfortunately, because of the number of people on the call, you are all muted. We have to manage the feedback that way. So the way you can ask your questions is to type them in. So in your control panel, you have a place to any questions you have. I will monitor that question panel throughout and work very hard. Now, of course, today we have just 30 minutes. This is a very fast time period. We're going to cover as much as we possibly can in that very quick time period that we have available. Now, the good news is at the end of our quick 30 minutes today, I do have something special for you, so hang out. Okay, what is our agenda today? Well, when you signed up for the webinar, you probably saw this. We are going to talk about coach qualifications. We're going to talk about coachee interests, compatibility with the coach and the client, the coachee, and then, of course, provide some resources for you. So before I even get into coaching qualifications, what is coaching? And many of you are familiar with this definition. It comes from the International Coach Federation, and they define coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So very, very exciting definition just in terms of it's a partnership, it's thought-provoking, it's creative, it's inspirational, and it maximizes potential both personally and professionally. Now, when you think about coaching, how does it actually work? Many of you are familiar with the coaching model we talk about. I think this is very insightful, so I'm going to go through it very quickly. I call this the staircase to success coaching model. Now, if you're going to build the staircase, before you do anything, you've got to have a foundation or a framework to build that staircase. Could be challenging just to throw those steps up in midair, right? So how do you build the staircase? Well, that foundation for coaching in order to move up the stairs to success is going to start with training. So when you think about matching a coach and a client, you do want to think about the training of the coach. And we're going to talk about a difference in terms of coach training versus their experience because those are separate. So in this particular model, we're referring to coach training. You want to know about the coach competency. So when we get into coach qualifications, that's what we're referring to, their competencies. And very specifically, the 11 core competencies that are published by the International Coach Federation. And then, of course, you want to know you've got a coach who is following a code of ethics. It is incredibly significant that you ask the question of the coach if they're not offering that independently. Because knowing that they haven't subscribed to that code of ethics and that they know what their code of ethics is incredibly important in that relationship. It's foundational to really developing the level of trust that's going to make a significant difference in the success of the coaching relationship. Now, once you have these three pieces in place for the coach, the relationship itself begins to be built. The first step is having an agreement. So on the front end of setting up a relationship between a coach and a client, you want an agreement as far as what is this relationship? What's the role of the coach? What's the role of the client? What are the responsibilities? How is the process managed and handled? And you want that agreement in writing. Then, understanding. You'll find a common theme as we go through our quick webinar today about how important it is to have rapport in the coaching relationship. This starts with understanding. And when I say understanding, what I'm talking about is the coach understanding the client. Who are they? How do they think? How do they process? How do they function? And the coach, with that understanding, having the ability to adjust and work with the client based on who they are. Then the rapport. And there are so many studies, indicators that the number one indication of success in a coaching relationship is the rapport between the coach and the client. And that is built on the client having confidence in the coach, who they are because of their training, competency, ethics, that trust because of the agreement, and because when the coach understands the client and adjusts to them, it creates a comfort level for the client. So all of this is building consecutively. Now, in the coaching relationship itself, of course, communication is what it's all about. How the coach listens, how they interact, the coach and the client, and then, of course, the questions that are being asked. Through this process, the client is exploring what they want, what their possibilities are, what their barriers are, what their strategy is, and how they're going to move forward. Because ultimately, that strategy is what is providing the client the process for moving toward their doorway called success, the way they define it. So that's our basic coaching model. Now, what does that mean to us in terms of coach qualifications? Well, let's get the basics in place. We want to know the coach is trained and or certified. Different people have different understandings of what those definitions mean. So when we say trained, yes, coach-specific training. Most often it's through a certification program. Ideally, you're looking for someone who's a member of the International Coach Federation. You know they're there. So that training, that they have the expertise in what they're doing as a coach, is incredibly significant. You want to know that they've developed the competencies, and I will share with you what those coaching competencies are. There are 11 of them, and that training is how that coach is developing the specific coaching competencies. You want to know, of course, that ethics are in place. So typically a coach will provide a copy of their code of ethics to the client, either electronically on their website with a link. They'll discuss it with their client so you know it's there. And you want to know that the coach has a coach. Well, think about it this way. If they're coaching and they don't believe in coaching enough to have their own coach, what does that mean? So very often that's an indicator of their own level of effectiveness. And then, of course, that they have a process. They know specifically what they're doing and how they're doing it. So let's talk through these things. The competencies that are developed during that training, and they do include the Code of Ethics, come from the International Coach Federation. Now, the competencies are separated into 4 different categories. So from the ground up, we're going to build this coaching relationship just like we built the staircase to success. The first part is setting the foundation. And what does that mean? Well, the coach having the ethical guidelines. The ICF publishes a Code of Ethics. In coach training programs, the coach has learned about that Code of Ethics. They're setting themselves up with that. Then the coaching agreement. So we talked about when you start that coaching relationship, you have that agreement. What are the roles of the coach, the client, everyone knowing what everyone's responsible for and how it works. That is the foundation for that coaching relationship. And it is on the coach to have those competencies and set that up. The next level of qualification is for co-creating the relationship. Now, what does that mean? It means developing that trust and intimacy. Well, when you think about it in that coaching relationship, back to the number one indicator of success being the rapport between the coach and the client, that starts with the client trusting the coach and feeling confident and comfortable enough to really talk with them about whatever it is, because that open, clear conversation is absolutely essential. Then, coaching presence. Now, what does that mean to us? Well, in terms of the coaching relationship and identifying a coach that you do want to work with, it's knowing that they really are totally, fully, mentally, physically, and emotionally present to the client, to who the client is and what's going on for the client. So it's that level of awareness. And you'll find out in just a few minutes how you know that, how you start recognizing that. Now, communicating effectively. There are 3 core communication skills that the coach is going to have and further develop in their coach training. They include listening skills, questioning, how they ask their questions, and then direct communication, because the coach is entirely focused on that process with the client, and it's all wrapped around the communication process. Next, the 4th category of competency for the coach in terms of their qualifications is their ability to create awareness. Well, this is a further extension of being present to the client and their powerful questioning. Designing actions. Now, here's a huge caveat. Sometimes we think, well, the coach is the one who's going to figure out the action steps. And actually, no. It's the client who determines their own action steps. And here's the further caveat to it. Sometimes there's a co-creation of this, because sometimes it's about creating experiences, processes, or tools for the client that they're going to use. And that designing of that process, experience, or tool very often comes from the coaching relationship. If you want further examples of this, there's actually a blog series running that gives several examples of that on the website. Now, planning and goal setting. Now, of course, that's what coaching is leading toward, the client defining what their plan is, what their specific goals are, how they're moving toward that. Back to that strategy piece in the staircase to success. And then ultimately to accountability. Accountability of the client, the coachee, to themselves, and the coach serves as their accountability partner. So that means part of the qualification of the coach includes knowing, hey, for this client, how do they want me to be their accountability partner? And typically the coach is actually asking that question of the client. So these are the competencies you want in the coach. We mentioned also having a process. So it's very interesting. There's been a couple of studies done on this, and they say, okay, how does somebody decide who they're going to hire as a coach? And one from the Harvard Business Review was that the coach had a very clear model and process for how they did their coaching. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. Some of you are familiar with this because you've done coach training with us, and some of you, this is a different perspective. So initially, when you first start the coaching relationship, very often you have an introductory coaching session. Typically, that's actually prior to the formal, if you will, beginning of the relationship. It's a chance to make sure it is a good match between the coach and the client. If you're internal coach, meaning you work in the same organization as the coachee, the person that you're going to coach, it's a chance to make sure, yes, it's an effective match, and yes, this person does want this coaching. If you are a coach that is in business for yourself, this is doing a couple of things. One, it's one answer to one of the questions that was submitted. How do you get clients? Well, you give them a free introductory session. It's 20 to 30 minutes. It's also the answer to the very title of this webinar, Matching the Coach and the Client, because that introductory session is an opportunity for the client, the coachee, to experience that coach. How do they function? How do they operate, etc. It's also a chance for the coach to get to know the coachee. And both of them are considering, hey, are we going to be effective in a coaching relationship? You're experiencing whether or not you have that rapport between the coach and the coachee. Now, once you do start the coaching relationship, the next step in your process is an opening coaching session. Typically, what you want happening there is an exploration of the big picture. And the reason for that is because there are many influencing factors. Whatever specific goal a client has, there are a number of things that play into what it is and how it works for them. So exploring that big picture. By the second coaching session, it's how is that client really going to be focused and engaged, motivated, buying in and following through on what it is they want. Now, the coaching process itself is an ongoing system or setup in terms of prioritizing what's most significant, strategizing how they're moving toward that, developing the specific action plan, and measuring their progress and celebrating successes. And you continue that process. Now, as you do wrap up a coaching relationship, please keep in mind, of course, that it is intended to have a wrap-up. Typically, a coaching relationship lasts about 12 months, according to a study done by the International Coach Federation. Now, of course, you'll have some that are 3 months, some that are 6, some that are 2 years or more. Most often about 12 months. Now, when you wrap up a coaching session, a relationship, you want to know that the client is set up for their own long term. What are they doing in terms of taking from what they gained during the coaching relationship and applying that for themselves on an ongoing basis, and having a way that you're setting that up and closing out your relationship. Now, another part in terms of coaching qualification, in addition to the competencies in the process, you've got a couple of major considerations. So the first, for those of you that are within an organization and you're looking at having a coach for someone in that organization, you're deciding whether to have an internal coach or an external coach. So big consideration, we're going to give a little insight on that. And then the other consideration is, do you want the coach to be a subject matter expert or a process expert? So subject matter expert refers specifically to their knowledge and experience on a particular topic area, goal area, in a particular business or industry, based on what it is the client's focused on. A process expert is their expertise as a coach. So let's dig into these. The American Management Association did a study on internal versus external. And here's what they found. People, leaders, actually preferred the external coaches. Now, what's the reason they preferred the external coaches? It was a perceived level of expertise and specialized skills. They figured there was a higher level of confidentiality because they were from outside the organization. They also valued the objectivity and the fresh perspectives of someone from outside the organization. So fascinating. Now, there's more than this to that study. I definitely recommend checking it out. Now, let's keep going. A major finding from that same study from the American Management Association was that working with an external coach is significantly related to a successful coaching experience, regardless of the coach's level in the organization. Now, this is fascinating. And to a certain degree, there's a different angle on it, because in the same study, they went on to say that internal coaches seem to be most effective when aimed at a supervisor level or below. And the reason for that is they're more cost effective for a large number of employees. They're already familiar with the organization, and they specifically model the values of the organization and understand its culture. Now, another major finding, and I think this plays into the first major finding and the contradiction here. Externally training the coaches is strongly related with overall success, even though it's less often used. So what that means is one of the barriers for successful internal coaching is that the internal coaches aren't getting trained outside of the organization. And that's going to level the playing field. Now, overall, what are our takeaways? You want internal coaches for entry-level to mid-level management. You want them to be externally trained. You want external coaches for your highest levels of management and executives. That's where you're going to get your greatest success. Now, more on coach qualifications, their coaching expertise. So this is pulling together all of these pieces. We're talking about the training, the code of ethics, having the coaching process, and the core competencies. Now, a degree of subject matter expertise, and the degree is going to be different based on the client and what it is the client or the coachee wants to achieve. So let's talk about that for just a moment. If you have someone who is working on some soft skills, very often the coach has got transferable information. Sometimes you have a client that, no, it's really specific to a particular industry or a particular profession. And a coach that has a background, experience in that profession or industry may be incredibly helpful. On the pro side, it means they get what the industry is or the profession is, they know what's going on, they understand and are up to speed very quickly. Now here's the con side. Think back to that earlier statement from the study, fresh perspective. You see, sometimes when the coach has a level of subject matter expertise, they come in unawares often that they actually have their own agenda, their own, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be and how it's supposed to happen. So that subject matter expertise can be a help. It helps in terms of the coach understanding and knowing what to ask. It can also be a barrier because the coach comes in with their own idea of how it should be. So it's both a pro and a con. Most often, what you want is a coach who knows enough that they can be up to speed very quickly with the client and intelligently ask questions without it being someone who knows so much that they're really better in the role of a mentor or a consultant, which is very different. So that's coach qualifications. Now, what about the coachee? How do you know what's going on there? So let's think about a couple of things. Sometimes the coachee comes in with specific goals, whether it's a business goal, a career goal, or a goal in their own personal life. Other times, coachees are very big picture. Hey, the coaching relationship is about strategy and awareness for me overall. You will see that with high potentials within an organization. You'll see that with individuals hiring a coach sometimes at a midlife stage or when they're moving into retirement. There's kinds of things. It's different reasons. So what is the coachee interest? Now, as you dig into that, there's a big consideration here. Is it going to be a specific focus in this coaching relationship, or are you going to look at the whole person? So specific focus is, if somebody hires me, for example, to advance their career, that's all they want to talk about. We're going to talk about job search strategies, resumes, interviewing, etc. Alternatively, the whole person approach says, well, when somebody's going after a career, their family situation plays into what they're going after, because that's got a lot to do with where they're chasing a job. It's got a lot to do with the financial aspects of it. How much flexibility do they have in terms of that income? So the whole person approach is designed to consider all aspects of the individual to have that big awareness. Now, of course, most often you want a balance of that in the coaching relationship. You want to start out in an opening session with the big picture, and then as you move forward, the client is defining, hey, here's what's important to me right now, and they are choosing the focus. So here's what's important to consider in starting this relationship. Is the coachee aware of the difference between specific focus and the whole person? And is the coachee aware of the impact of the different approaches in the coaching? So that means it's really on the coach to have that conversation with the coachee and explain the approach and the process. Because ultimately, back to that rapport being the #1 indicator of success, they're working together to co-create the process for the coaching relationship. Very, very important. Now, more on coachee interests. What's their level of buy-in? Sometimes people say, you know, I'm concerned, and actually this was one of your questions from before the webinar. What if a company hires someone and, This isn't a problem employee, or there's some barriers or derailing behaviors that they want addressed. And that coachee comes in going, yeah, I'm not so much into this coaching relationship. Well, if the coachee is not buying into the process, how effective is the process actually going to be? And that's a challenge in and of itself. So creating coachee buy-in, let me share with you, is possible. So even when the coachee initially is saying, yeah, I'm only going to coaching because I have to, because I'm told to, an effective coach in an introductory conversation is going to be able to turn that around and say, okay, yes, and let's talk about coaching. Let's talk about the ethics, who my client is. It's you. And what does that mean in terms of confidentiality? What does that mean in terms of the relationship? And that coach will effectively create that. Alternatively, you have coaches that buy into it right from the get-go simply because they're aware of coaching and what it does. They have colleagues that have experienced success from it, etc. So we definitely are looking for that buy-in. Another consideration is, are they coachable? Is this person really open to exploring, fully exploring different possibilities, considering different approaches, different opportunities, and really interested and motivated in making some change? And how is the coach effectively supporting that? Now, a couple of you asked questions, very similar, you worded them differently, about, gee, what if as a coach I feel like this is not the right client for me, or how do I know I should turn them down? These are considerations for you as a coach. If someone wants to hire you and they really aren't buying into what the coaching process is, and again, it's very different, or they're not coachable, they're not really willing to go through the effort to make change, then you've got to question whether or not it's worth starting that relationship. Because ultimately, as a coach, your business is built on your ability to be effective. And if there is a potential coachee that is really not coachable and not buying in, ultimately it's going to hurt your business. So look past the short term, oh gosh, I'm working on getting clients and building my business. Look at the long term in terms of what you want with this. I'll give you an example from personal experience. I had a client who wanted a coach, and this client really felt like it was everyone else in their life that needed help and change, and they just wanted to talk about that in the process. Was this client buying into coaching? No. Were they coachable? Absolutely not. They didn't feel like they wanted to or needed to make any change. And so it was going to go nowhere fast. And that's a coaching relationship where I say, okay, I'm going to fire myself. I'm not the right person for this individual. And that leads me to another of the questions that was submitted ahead of time. What if you decide you're not the right coach for that person? Well, when they are buying into the coaching process and they are coachable, and it's really about the relationship and the rapport or appropriate level of subject matter expertise, then what you want to do is refer them to a different coach. This is a fabulous opportunity for everyone. It means you have coaches that you network with, and when they're better for that client, you send them that person. And when they have a client that you're the better coach for, they'll send them to you in turn. So it supports everyone's success. Definitely want to think about that. And those were great questions. Ultimately, it's this awareness. What are the expectations of the coachee? What do they want out of that relationship? How do they think it's going to work? And then, of course, having that conversation on the front end. What is this relationship, and how are we going to measure the value of the relationship from the coachee's perspective? Now, compatibility, the big one in this coaching relationship. To have that compatibility is going to start with confidence in the coaching relationship itself. It's going to be built with the communication process, and that ultimately serves in developing the rapport and trust. So, as a coach, how do you effectively support that compatibility? Well, think about it. We talked about internally setting up that introductory session, and if you're hiring an external coach, the best practice is to give them 3 possible coaches that they interview and choose from. because then they're deciding where they have that connection and that level of rapport. If you're a coach who's in business and you're deciding whether or not to take on a particular client, or you want to build your business, you offer free introductory sessions, the 20 to 30 minutes, where the client experiences coaching, experiences you as a coach, and has that opportunity for the buy-in. At the same time, you're saying, am I the right coach for this person? Now, what does that do? Well, back to the American Management Association study. Having an interview with a prospective coach has the strongest relationship with reporting a successful coaching program. So you do want that introductory session. Now, there's a common theme emerging here. Perhaps you're picking up on this. Matching the right coach with the right client is associated with the high success rates. Matching people according to expertise, coaching expertise, the coach qualifications, and then an appropriate degree of subject matter expertise, along with the personality where they're comfortable with each other, are both the best and most commonly used strategies. So developing that rapport, having the coaching expertise, and having the appropriate degree of subject matter expertise. Now, resources for you. If you're looking for a coach, at findacertifiedcoach.com, you can search by specialty, you can browse the directory, or you can ask us for a referral and we'll make recommendations. For those of you on the call that are coaches, if you have gone through your training certification with the Center for Coaching Certification, you can list yourself in this searchable directory and include your phone number, website, and email address. A different resource for all of you. If you want us matching your coach, potentially providing multiple coaches for a program, if you are looking at support for having a program for your internal coaches, if you're looking at training, contact the Center for Coaching Solutions because we've got all of those services available for you. And of course, those of you who are interested in becoming certified, please visit the Center for Coaching Certification. Now, I mentioned I was going to give you something at the end of our webinar today. I realize I've gone over a minute or two, so let me go quick. I'm going to give you a free 30 minutes. You're on the call. So if you email me or call me within the next 24 hours, I will provide you a link to my calendar. You can go into my calendar, choose a 30-minute time block, and schedule yourself in based on what works for you. So if you're interested in hiring a coach, you're interested in program support, or you're interested in training for coaches, we definitely want to make ourselves available and be of service to you. At this point, I'm going to give you my email addresses. I'd like to also include the website and take additional questions. So I believe I've done a good job of covering the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and as we went through the program, I think we pulled those in as we went through. I do want to make sure of that. So additional questions, please feel free to type them in. Those of you that are here, and I've seen this already, a couple of things for you. I will load the recording of today's webinar on our YouTube channel. I will email a link to that to everybody that's on the call. So if you want to go back through this, see it again, you're going to have access to it. So yes, in terms of making that available to you to come back to again. So thank you for that interest. In terms of, let's see, a couple of more questions that come in. Okay, the coach training classes, no, they're definitely a slower pace. The concept for today was to provide some quick content in a very short time period. The coaching classes are definitely more interactive and lots of conversation. So great question there. Another question, help with obtaining clients. What I will share with you is those who go through our coach training, following the training program, we do offer a class on marketing yourself as a coach, and we cover a lot of helpful tips. We talk about using social media. That is a great way. Getting yourself out there on LinkedIn, for example, is a great way for obtaining clients. Being published is a great way for obtaining clients. establishes credibility, gives you something you're speaking about. And that actually is going to lead the #1 way for obtaining clients is speaking. It's doing presentations and trainings. We create opportunities for those as well. If you're interested in that, just contact me. That is the #1 way as far as getting clients. Another question, and I think I addressed it a little bit, and I want to go into a little bit more detail for you on this one. And the question was, if a client wants to work with a coach and the coach is saying, you know what, this is not a good match for me. I talked a little bit about referring them to other people. And let me share language with you for doing that. If you simply say, based on what you are interested in and what you want to accomplish, I believe I know other coaches that are going to more effectively serve you. Let me give you their names and phone numbers and email addresses. And that way, that client is actually going to appreciate your professionalism, and that awareness is going to come back as well. So definitely a good question. Appreciate that. Follow-up question on the social media that just came in. Do you want to be a coaching expert or do you want to be a process expert? So great question. First off, on the social media sites, yes, you want to say, this is my training, my certification as a coach. You want to establish that expertise. Clients do also want to know about your background. So you want to share your professional experience. That's not from a training class. I'm talking about places you've worked, professions, industries, etc. Basically, your bio. So it starts with knowing that you have the coaching expertise, and it builds with knowing your background and expertise specifically. So hopefully that's helping with that. I believe at this point, another question that came in earlier, and let me respond to this one. I don't think I've touched on this. Actually, a little bit. So when you have a reluctant or resistant client, typically that means someone else is hiring the coach for them. So it goes back to doing that introductory session and really clarifying. Very often when it's a reluctant or resistant client, they think the coach is going to run to the employer and tell them everything. And so it's making sure that individual client knows, hey, the confidentiality is owed to you. I only report what you agree to have reported. We can actually work on creating that together. So talking about that level of confidentiality is huge. Talking about, okay, given that the employer or the company is hiring a coach for you, they're investing in you. Given that you have that, what do you want out of it? And setting it up and really giving them ownership of that coaching relationship and that coaching process are the single most effective tools in terms of overcoming that resistance. So great question there. I do look forward to your emails, your phone calls. I look forward to be of service for you in what you want to accomplish. Thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate your time and your participation. Hope we've given you some great insights. I definitely appreciate the thank yous that I'm getting in your question panel, so thank you as well for your time, your participation today, and your interest. I look forward to being of service. I'm going to go ahead and close out our webinar today. Do watch for an email where I give you a link if you'd like to see it again. So thank you, everyone.